This,
Yay!
I'm here to talk about growing healthy food on a budget. Um, First of all, why would you want to grow your own food? Oop. I am so sorry. I keep losing the. Okay, you can see it now?
Yeah, we've seen it all along.
We can see it. You haven't lost it.
Okay, well, I had the bar with the people in front of it, so I couldn't see it. I'm sorry. It's taking me 10 minutes to get set up here. Okay, so why grow your own food? Well, in this presentation, I'm assuming that you want to save money. And you can do that if you pick the right vegetables. If you like produce and you go to the grocery store and you like to buy organic produce, you know that organic produce is expensive and maybe sometimes a lot more expensive than regular produce.
Sure is.
Yeah, but it's super easy to grow organic vegetables in your own garden. What you grow in your garden, the food that you eat from it, it's fresher, it's got more nutrients in it, so it's better for your health. Garden produce tastes better. You get good exercise when you go out there. It's good for your mental health. It's gardening with your family and friends and sharing the food that comes out of the garden is good for your connections with them. Growing vegetables from seed makes it easy to try new varieties, which is fun and interesting. You reduce food waste because you're eating your food fresh or preserving it, and you're only picking it when you need it. When you grow your own food, it's better for the environment. There's no shipping, there's no pesticides that might be used in the produce that you buy in the grocery store. And a fun fact, well, maybe this isn't fun, is that the average distance your food travels to get to you is 1,500 miles. It's kind of wild, isn't it? And also, growing your own food improves your food security. Now, I have to say that I have made some assumptions in this presentation. One is that you want to save money. Two is that you have limited space. And three is that you live within driving distance of me. You live in the Pacific Northwest. It's cold and rainy 2/3 of the year. And I don't know about you, but my soil is rock and clay. And a good percentage of it is rock. So what that does is it forces me then to think about different ways to grow my vegetables. So I um, I have raised beds and I have to buy soil. If you live in an area that is not rainy a lot of the year and you don't have clay and rocks, maybe you don't need those things. So, and another thing that as I was working on this presentation, I realized that I kind of had to go back to gardening 101. So some of the information in my presentation is pretty basic. And the reason I felt like I had to do that is that we're here to talk about what you have to source for your garden, right? What you might have to pay for. Um, and in order to really spend your money wisely, you need to know what you need to buy and you need to know why you need to buy it. So that why, maybe the why that I have doesn't really apply to you. So then maybe that the what doesn't apply. So um, that I'm just kind of trying to set up what I assumed and where I'm coming from in this presentation. So the first thing you want to do is you want to set up a place to plant, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you have a big enough place that you can put in a raised bed or some kind of bed. And maybe you don't, maybe you have to use containers. And around here, we use raised beds or hugel beds because we have a lot of rain, so we need drainage because most vegetable plants don't like being in wet soil a lot. Raised beds also extend our growing season because the soil warms up earlier and it stays warm longer. And a lot of the plants that we like to grow, like tomatoes and peppers, like warm soil. And it also gives roots a really good growing environment, a lot better than clay and soil and clay and rocks. Um, One inexpensive idea, because you can use mostly yard waste, is a hugel bed. And this works surprisingly well. We have a hugel bed at our demonstration garden, and it was built the same way with tree trunks and branches and leaves. And then on the top of that, you put some soil. And it's amazing how well plants grow in this. And it doesn't have to be decomposed. You can plant plants in it the first year, and it works really, really well. What it does is it gives the plant's roots a lot of space and air, and it also retains moisture really well. So it's really ideal. It gives you good drainage, and it gives the roots what they need. And so it's ideal, especially if you're not trying to spend a lot of money. Other ways to make beds, you can use logs to raise up the soil in the garden bed. You can use logs around the beds. You can use rocks. The one on the left I thought was pretty cute, an old bookcase. And here's, but if you, oops, sorry. If, if you do want to actually build a bed out of lumber or bricks, there are places where you can source that material without spending the prices that you would get at a big box store. You can use pallets, you just have to use the right pallets. Some recycling centers save lumber that is being thrown away for people to pick up. There's a lot of sites out there that people post free materials that they want to get rid of, but they just don't want to throw it away because somebody else might be able to use it. Sites like Nextdoor, Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace are places you can go for that. Habitat for Humanity Restore, there's one in Longview, might have what you're looking for. And construction sites always end up with something extra at the end, and then they have to pay to landfill it. And I bet that if you asked them nicely, a lot of them would be happy for you to take away what they can't use. But if you don't have enough room for a garden bed, you can also use containers. Containers, again, can be really expensive, but you can do it a lot less expensively or almost for no cost using other materials. Grow bags are pretty inexpensive. They're a lot cheaper than regular pots are. You can use dollar store plastic pots and containers too and just poke holes in the bottom. Both of those would have some cost associated with them, but there's a lot of other things you can do that wouldn't cost you anything. Some landscapers and nurseries will give away the used pots so that they don't have to landfill them. Milk jugs, the gallon ones, are great because you can use them to plant things in. You can use them as cloches in the winter to protect your plants, and you can also use them as a watering can by punching the holes in the lid. You can use 5-gallon buckets are a really good size for bigger plants. Things like coolers or putting a trash bag inside of a cardboard box. I saw a lot of people do that and they were really happy with it. And that's pretty cheap. And we around here, we save every single yogurt and sour cream and cottage cheese container. And milk cartons are also good with the tops cut off. All of those containers you can use for so many things in the garden, for scooping soil, for planting plants in. Again, you would want to put holes in the bottom of it. And if you are putting these buckets on your back porch or on your back balcony and you think that they're unsightly, I saw so many cute ways of dressing up buckets online. Paint, decoupage, I mean, there were so many ideas out there. So don't think you have to spend a lot of money on containers. So sorry. Come on. Okay. And another way that you can come on. Trying to get to the right page. Sorry about this. I need to buy a new computer. Or maybe it's a mouse. It won't let me say on that one. Let me try this one more time. That picture has a bunch of ways that you can grow up instead of out. And I had a lot of ideas about how you, things that like tomatoes need a cage. Cattle panel is really good. Cattle panel is not cheap, but it makes a really, really good, strong tomato cage. Pole beans are another thing that can go up and are really productive, and you need poles for those. Um, Peas and beans, you can trellis. And another thing that we do to save space and make the garden more workable is that we stake our, I don't individually stake my fava beans and my asparagus. What I do instead is I put 2x2s on each of the corners and then tie a rope around the whole thing. And what that does is it holds up the whole thing so it's not doesn't get in your way when you're walking by, and the plants are supported. So hope this doesn't continue, but this this page shows other ideas about how you can go up. The left is a strawberry tower. The center is a slinky on a pole, which I thought was really a cool idea. The bean is crawling up. I think it's a bean. No, it's not a bean. It's crawling up it, and slinkies never last more than a day. So if you have kids, maybe you have a bunch of slinkies that don't work anymore. And on the right side, right side, they've used fishing line to support the peas. And I thought the bicycle wheel stack was pretty cool idea too. I bet it looks great when it has plants on it. So now that you've kind of decided, oh dear. Now that you've kind of decided what you are going to plant in, you then need to decide what kind of soil you're going to use, because plants need soil unless you're growing hydroponically, but we're not talking about hydroponic gardening. And I think hydroponic gardening needs a lot of setup. So I don't know that that's an actually cheap way to garden. But the first thing I wanted to talk about as far as soils are concerned is seed starting mix. If you want to grow vegetables, a lot of them need to be started indoors when the weather is still bad, so that when they're put out when it starts to warm up, they're a good size. And I really strongly suggest that you use a seed starting mix for that. I tried when I first moved here to not use a seed starting mix and use garden soil and my own compost. And I tell you, the plants did not like it, the seeds didn't like it, and then there were bugs and fungus, and it just was. Now I use a seed starting mix, and I am so much more successful. So seed starting mixes are designed to provide a sterile environment without bugs and fungus. They keep the seeds the right level of moist, and they're light and airy, so they provide air to the roots, and roots do need air. So it really helps with the germination, and it really helps the seedlings survive. You'll get a lot better production, and you'll have a lot happier experience if you use a seed starting mix. Now, seed starting mixes in the store are not cheap, but you can make them yourself and make them a lot less expensively. You can buy the components, which are peat moss or washed coco coir, and perlite or vermiculite, which makes the soil drain a lot better, and it also provides a lot of air for the roots. So you can make it yourself. You don't need a lot of it. I would recommend using sterile materials that you do buy somewhere. And when you start the seeds, you can start them in really small cells. Like each set of seeds really only needs like a square inch or two of soil. And people use things like egg cartons. We do use toilet paper tubes cut in half. They work really well, especially for corn. And you can make paper pots, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on the pots that you use to start seeds. The second thing, oh gosh, the second thing I wanted to talk about is potting soil. And I'm trying to explain why you need these things, because potting soil is more expensive than garden soil, and seed starting mix is more expensive than potting soil. So what you use potting soil for is to up pot seedlings into before they get transplanted to the garden. And you also use it whenever you're doing container gardening. Except for some plants like succulents, you might put a different soil in. But potting soils again provide a sterile, airy, well-drained environment for the plants, but it also provides nutrients to the plants. Seedlings don't need nutrients because they get the nutrients that they need from the seed itself. But once a plant starts to put on its true leaves, it needs more nutrients than that. Using potting soil instead of garden soil will help your plants and it will make your life easier. It will just be happier gardening too. And again, you can make your own potting mix a lot less expensively than you can buy it. And it is composed of peat moss or cocoa coir, compost, and perlite or vermiculite. You'll find recipes for both seed starting mix and potting soil on the internet. Some people also add other things like fertilizer and lime and wood chips to it, and it depends on what you're planting and how long the plants are going to be in the container. Will influence what you put into your potting mix. Again, I recommend sterile materials. So the next one is garden soil. Garden soil is used in raised beds and to amend garden beds when the soil is poor or heavy like clay. So it adds loamy material to the soil. It can have things in it like compost, peat, and shredded bark. I don't recommend using one that has sand in it. And what garden soils do is they help improve the drainage and they provide nutrients to the plant. There are, again, I'm talking about something that you purchase, but there are ways to, and I don't know of any ways to get it for free, but there are, at least around here, but there are ways to get it a lot less expensively than at a big box store. There's a number of places in Portland, for example, that sell OMRI certified soil that's free of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. And they sell it for like $25 a cubic yard. So if you have a truck or know somebody that has one, you can pick up soil and use that. I would recommend doing your research before you buy any soil and asking around to see who has good soil, because I've heard a lot of horror stories and you don't want to have any of those experiences. Definitely. And last but certainly not least, as far as soils are concerned, is compost. Compost is soil that you can make yourself for free. It's a great fertilizer. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need a fancy container. You don't need something that turns it. You just need a place to put a pile in your yard. Preferably not near the house and preferably out of in the sun. And to that, you add what they call green materials and brown materials. And you're supposed to do them in a 50% ratio of each, but it'll compost anyways. So don't worry too much about it. You can put in food waste from your kitchen, but not meats or grains because that attracts critters. And other great green materials like grass and leaves and weeds, but not the seeds from them. And brown materials like dead leaves. And the pile will compost faster if you turn it periodically. Again, not something absolutely necessary, but it certainly does help it compost faster. And another good source of compost-like material is getting free wood chips from your local arborist, your parks department, or chip drop. And with that, you can do two things. One, you can put it on your ornamental garden beds, put it on thickly, and it will help. It improves the soil a lot. It retains moisture and it stifles the weeds. They're really, really good for that. Another thing you could do is add it to your compost pile. Make sure you put some greens with it, and you can make your own soil. Another thing, you could also put manure inside of there, which you can get for free. So that's free, and that's really good stuff. Ah, I don't know what's going on, guys. I'm so sorry. Okay, since I'm on the topic of nutrients, I thought I'd talk about fertilizers here. Again, this is basic gardening 101 information, but I felt like I needed to go back to this so that instead of going and buying a bag of expensive fertilizer that is specifically, oh, this is tomato fertilizer, you could figure out what tomatoes need and you could buy the components of the fertilizer and make it yourself. And you could do that a lot less expensively. Plus, you need to know what nutrients plants need to economize. Like, you don't need to put, there's some plants that don't need any fertilizer. And there's some plants that only want to be fertilized when you put them in the ground. After that, they don't need it. And so you need to know what the plant really needs in order to only buy what it really needs. So the most important nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And they're go by, I think they're chemical symbols probably, right? NPK. NPK is, you see this on every fertilizer bag. You'll see 3 numbers in a row separated by dashes, and that is how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is in the fertilizer that you're buying. Nitrogen supports leaf and stem growth, so it helps a plant be green and grow. Phosphorus is good for roots and for making flowers, seeds, and fruits. So if it's fruiting, it may need phosphorus, and potassium is also an essential nutrient for flower and fruit production and plant health. There's also some micronutrients that some plants need more of than others, like copper and boron and iron and calcium. But the fertilizer that you apply really depends on the plant, like I was saying, and its growth stage. Different plants need different nutrients, and different plants need different nutrients at different times of their lives. Like peppers prefer nitrogen. You would give them nitrogen when they're young so that they get big. But when they get big and they start fruiting and flowering, then you want to give them a more phosphorus heavy fertilizer. And at that point in time, if you give them too much nitrogen, they're going to focus on growing leaves but not fruit. So fertilizers also break down into 2 different types, organic and synthetic. Organic ones are made from organic materials. They're lower in nutrients as a percentage of their volume, and they release their nutrients slowly over time. They also improve soil health and structure because they're more than just nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. Synthetic fertilizers are manufactured from chemical compounds. They're higher in nutrients as a percentage of volume. They're fast acting and they need to be used according to the instructions, because if you don't, you can burn your plants very easily, actually. And using too much of it can also negatively impact soil and water quality and can degrade the soil structure and contribute to salt buildup over time. So that's not saying that they're bad. That's just saying that you have to be really careful about how you use them. Organic fertilizers, it's really hard to over fertilize or do any of those other things with them. I guess I'm an organic gardener, so I kind of focused on organic fertilizers, but I tried to find ones to give you ideas about that are less expensive, like compost, of course, like we talked about, is a good fertilizer, and chicken manure is a pretty cheap one, and it's a pretty balanced fertilizer. Fish emulsion, I wouldn't really call it cheap, but it is a liquid fertilizer. You add it to water, it's concentrated, and it's really good for use on like young seedlings, for example, that need more nitrogen-based fertilizer. A few other ones, I guess, that are relatively inexpensive are blood meal, which is heavy nitrogen, and bone meal, which is heavy phosphorus, and alfalfa pellets are, and I'm not talking about the alfalfa that they sell as fertilizer. I'm talking about chicken food. You can put that on your garden as a fertilizer. It's a 202. It does take some time to degrade. It takes at least 4 to 8 weeks, but it's really cheap in the big bags. And a couple other ones just as examples for potassium, there's langomanite, and for micronutrients, some people use kelp meal. Neither of those, would I say, are cheap, but they are examples of some other kinds of fertilizers that you can buy that are organic. So do you have to fertilize your vegetables? It's up to you, but they will be healthier and produce more. So I think it's a good environment, a good investment. And the least expensive fertilizers that you could do are to make your own compost, or secondly, age manure. It's a really good fertilizer, and you can get manure for free from not just family and friends and local farms or stables, but on online sites you can get free manure. There are people that have it available for you. Another one is biosolids. Cowlitz County Solid Waste Division gives away biosolids for free. You can put these on your vegetable garden. They are biosolids are treated, they're sanitized, they're thoroughly tested. So it's up to you. We did use it on our lawn in an area that wasn't growing grass, and it's doing really, really well. And I think it was a good fertilizer. I talked about alfalfa pellets, and to be fair, synthetic fertilizers are less expensive than organic ones. So that's a consideration too when you decide what you're going to put on your vegetables. So now that we've talked about where you're going to put your plants and the soil that you're going to use, then we need to decide what we're going to plant. Well, one thing to consider, of course, is what grows well in your area. You want your plants to do well. I would strongly suggest that you think about what your family likes to eat, because I grow lots of things that my husband doesn't like to eat. And maybe I shouldn't do as much of that as I do. And these plants, the vegetable plants, for the most part, need full sun. So you need full 6 to 8 hours of sun a day at least. If you're on the low end of that, I'd still suggest trying it. And see what you can grow. Maybe it won't be as productive as it would be if we're in full sun, but if you're getting some vegetables and you're happy with it, then that's good. I am going to focus on what plants are most productive in a small garden space. And what I'd recommend there are tomatoes, zucchini, beans that grow on a pole, peas, cucumbers, and cut and come again greens. And I am going to talk a little bit about each of these. When you decide what you want to plant, you should also consider how much what you're thinking about growing costs in the grocery store. Like, if you don't have very much space, I wouldn't really recommend growing onions or carrots, because you can buy them pretty cheaply in the grocery store, and they do take space in the garden. But let's say that you like shishito peppers and leeks. Well, I would definitely grow them in the garden, because they're really expensive in the store. Like, I don't know why they are so expensive in the store, but they're super easy to grow in your garden, and they don't take up a lot of space. When we talk about plants and seeds, I would say I'm not going to really talk about planting plants you buy at a store, because it is so much cheaper to grow them from seed. Seed in itself, though, can cost money, and I have some suggestions on things you can do to get free seed or low-cost seed. There are a lot of libraries near us that have seed libraries, and you can get seed for free. There are a lot of organizations online that give away heirloom seeds, and heirloom seeds are open pollinated, meaning that you can save the seeds when the plant goes to seed, and you can plant that plant again next year, and you never have to buy that seed again. You may have a local seed exchange near you. There are sales at the end of the year because the stores need to get rid of the stock that they have. They can't sell those seeds again next year. You can coordinate seed purchases with friends. You can share seeds and save on the shipping costs. And just plain old the cost of the packages of seeds. You can your seed, when you let your plants go to seed in the garden, you can let them reseed themselves and they'll grow just exactly when they're supposed to grow, and you can transplant them to where you want them. And that makes it really super easy to garden. Now, seeds can be expensive when you buy them in bulk. I'm sorry, less expensive when you buy them in bulk, but know that they don't last forever. There's a lot of seeds that do last 4 or 5 years, but there's some that don't. I wouldn't recommend buying peas or beans or anything in the allium family in bulk because those seeds really only last a couple of years. And do remember to store your seeds in sealed containers in a cool, dark place to make them last longer. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about seed saving because this is a great way to save money too. Again, you want to save seeds from heirloom open pollinated varieties. You can save seeds from hybrids, but they won't necessarily breed true, and they may not necessarily germinate well either. Seeds from self-pollinating plants like tomatoes and peppers are more likely to breed true, even if you have the plants different varieties next to each other. But if you want to save seeds from something like squash, you should space the squash plants apart from each other so that they don't cross-pollinate. Now, one thing I have a hard time doing, and that is the one that I should let go to flower or seed is my very best plant. My healthiest plant, my most productive plant, my best plant that's most adapted to my area, because you want those good genes. And if you want to have fun with it, you can keep doing this year after year after year, and you'll end up with a plant that is adapted to your yard's ecosystem. And it will be super healthy and disease resistant, and that's called land racing, which is an interesting concept, I think. Make sure that you dry your seeds properly. Different seeds need to be dried differently. And don't forget, right after you pick the seeds, to label them and date them, even if you haven't dried them yet, because you will forget. Now, there are certain seeds here in this, where I live, that you want to start indoors, and there are certain seeds that it's just fine or better to sow out in the garden. So I'm breaking those out into two different categories. The things like tomatoes, peppers, and so forth are warm season plants. They get planted here around mid to late May, meaning that you need to start them a couple months earlier than that, and it's way too cold and wet outside for them. So they need to be started indoors. There's a number of cool season plants that also are better off started indoors, like broccoli and cabbage, because they need to be planted out when they're of a decent size and mature before it gets too hot, because some of them don't like the heat. Also, plants with small seeds like cilantro and anything in the onion family are also much easier to plant indoors. And perennials like rhubarb and artichoke also need to be started early indoors because you want to plant them of good size in May, and you want them to be able to grow all summer long and establish a really good root system so that they overwinter well. There are seeds you can direct sow and are better off that way. Plants that have big seeds like beets and Swiss chard and peas are better off planted in the garden. Of course, bulbs and tubers like garlic and potatoes are better off planted in the garden. Warm season plants that are planted when the soil has warmed up, and it takes a while for our soil to warm up. It's supposed to be like 50 degrees to plant most things out there. Like beans and corn are examples of those kinds of plants. Carrots, I always recommend planting them in the garden because the roots are very susceptible to stunted root growth. And plants that you can sow an area with and then eat the thinnings so that in the end they're properly spaced apart, but you get food up until at that point. That's also good to direct sow in the garden. Couple things I thought I'd mention about direct sowing. We have birds and mice, and they love those seeds that I plant out there. So I always put row cover on top of the seeds until they get to be a couple inches tall. And anything that you direct sow in the garden does need to be kept moist until it's germinated. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the plants that I was suggesting that you grow if you want to have a lot of produce in a small space. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that would go into making a decision about what kind of seeds you would get. So tomatoes are broken down into two categories, determinate and indeterminate. And determinate tomatoes ripen within a short period of time, and they're also smaller plants and they don't get viney. So these are really good for containers, and they're all because they ripen within a short period of time. They're also good for something like doing paste tomatoes and canning over a short period of time instead of over months. Indeterminate tomatoes ripen over a much longer period of time, so they provide you a longer harvest, but they do need more maintenance, especially pruning. If you're just starting out with tomatoes, cherry tomatoes are easy to grow and they can be very productive. If you are growing in containers, most of these can be planted in containers, but if you really want a small tomato plant, look for something that says patio or dwarf. Around here, we also don't have a lot of what they call heat days. So you want to look for an early tomato with days of maturity of 75 days or less, or veer on that side. If you want to plant your tomatoes in containers and it's not a dwarf or a patio, then use at least a 15-gallon pot and a cage. And know that container tomatoes need more water and more fertilizer than those grown in the ground. And just a hint about tomatoes, bury them deep because they will grow roots all along the stem, and you will end up with a much healthier tomato plant and a more drought resistant plant. So, wow, come on, man. Okay. Anyways, on that is a list of tomato varieties that are known to be very productive. And I'm not going to go through any of these lists that I have. We do put our presentations on our website, and you can go back to the website and pause the page and look at the list. And some of these we sell at our plant sale. In fact, a fair amount of we do. Zucchini, of course, is known for yields. And sometimes those zucchinis just you go out in the garden, you look for the zucchinis, one's hiding under a leaf, and the next day it's 2 feet long. So they do provide a lot of food. I personally grow the Dunja zucchinis, and I like them because they don't vine all over, and so they take up less space. And of course, you can use zucchini in many different ways. Now tomatoes, you can you can freeze, you can eat them fresh, you can eat them raw. Zucchini doesn't have quite as many uses, but there are a lot of zucchini recipes out there. You can fry it like ratatouille and use it in something like a ratatouille. You can roast it and use it in a vegetable lasagna. You can make zoodles with it. And one thing that we do is we grate the extras, and we grate the great big ones too, and freeze them. And then during the winter, we make zucchini bread and zucchini pancakes, and sometimes put them in stews and soups because they just kind of melt if you cook them enough. Beans that grow on poles are very productive and good. They do need to be staked, and these kinds of beans produce over a long period of time, whereas bush beans generally don't. And so you get a lot more food out of a pole bean or an asparagus bean. As the asparagus beans is a Chinese long bean, basically. So I have some varieties here for you. And with green beans, of course, you can eat them fresh. You can cook them, pickle them, can them, or freeze them. So many uses. Peas are a cool season crop. You plant them in March and then you harvest them in mid-July. So this is the one plant that kind of overlaps with the footprint of the other plants. So you might have to have a little bit more space if you want to do peas. Peas do need to be trellised. And I have some varieties there of high yield varieties. And we personally grow the super sugar snap and they're delicious. Peas, of course, you can eat them fresh when they're the snap peas, and snow peas the same way, right? Eat them fresh, cook them, can them, or freeze them. Cucumbers are also another really productive plant, especially if you get the right variety. They need to be caged or trellised. And you pretty much eat cucumbers fresh or pickled. Then there are a number of different kinds. Okay. And another productive plant to plant is our cut and come again greens. So that's a green like a leaf lettuce where you can go out and you can cut the outside leaves, bring them in, make a salad, and a few days later you can go out and do the same thing. And you can do it over a long period of time. There's a list of greens. The last two are Asian greens that I grow that are really productive. I would highly recommend them, and they're both really tasty. Komatsuna is a little bit mustardy. It's kind of like a mustard green, but a little bit milder. And the other one, Chiji Masai, I guess tastes a little bit like broccoli, but it's really good and crunchy. And one other thing I wanted to mention here, celery is one that you can start from. You can buy celery in the grocery store and use all the celery, but save the bottom and put the bottom in water, and it will grow a new celery plant. And you can have celery off that plant for like a year. I've tried that with other plants, but celery is really the only one that I got a lot of production off of. And then you can let it go to seed. You can use the celery seed when you cook, and then plant that seed, and you'll never have to buy a celery seed. I have some other things to consider too when you're thinking about gardening and saving money with gardening. If you have the space, herbs are a good one because they cost a silly amount of money in the store, don't they? And they're super easy to grow here. Most of them grow year round, and most of them are evergreen. Parsley is the only one here that is not, that lasts like about a year and a half. Some of these you can put in a container, maybe not the rosemary or the sage. And like I said, they're pretty much evergreen all year long, providing you fresh herbs anytime you want them. Another thing you might want to consider are perennials, because perennials are a lot easier than annuals are. And they'll bring you food every year. Perennials just don't need as much attention. An annual has to grow to maturity and reproduce within 1 year. Perennials don't need to do that. And they can take longer to provide food, but then you'll get food every year from them. So this is a list of perennials that could grow very well here. I was kind of surprised about garlic and potato, onions, and shallots being perennials, but they are because if you left them in the ground, they would keep growing. But what we do is we dig them all up and we eat most of it, and then we save some of it and we plant it again the next year. So once you buy garlic cloves and plant them, and you never need to buy them again. And some other ideas about how to save space and use your garden space as efficiently as possible. If you have raised beds or hugel beds, square foot gardening is a really good thing to do, because instead of planting in rows, what you do is you plant, you saturate the area with plants. If you have a 4x8 bed and each plant needs a square foot, then you put 32 plants in it. And you'll be able to tend to it because you can reach in on the sides. You can also plant intensively, like let's say you have a 4x8 bed again, and you have 8 tomato plants in it. And that's how much space the tomato plants need. But you could put leeks on the south side of the bed and lettuce on the north side of the bed, and you don't need any more space for those plants, and it will work just fine. Another idea is succession planting, where you take something like lettuce or arugula and you plant some of it, And then a few weeks later, you go out and you plant some more. And then a few weeks later, you go out and plant some more. And what that does is it gives you kind of a continuous harvest. And another thing to consider to use your space wisely is that around here, we can garden pretty much all year round. There are vegetable plants that you can put in the summer for a fall or winter harvest. There are ones that you can put in the fall for a spring or summer harvest. What I would suggest is finding a good garden calendar for your area that has planting dates and harvest dates and looking at what you would like to eat. And you can, like, I plant potatoes, which go in the beginning of April. I harvest them in mid-July, and then I put in brassicas like broccoli and cauliflower and stuff like that. So, and then that stuff sometimes stays in the ground all winter long too. So you're using your bed all year. You'll get a lot more food from it that way. Couple other things that you could spend money on. I'm going to talk about. One of them is pesticides. I'm not recommending you spend money on it. I don't really use pesticides in my yard. What I do instead is I have a lot of flowering plants that attract pollinators and other beneficial insects. One of them, as an example, is borage, and it reseeds itself, and the bees love it. I really don't have much in the way of any sort of pest in my yard, and I think it's because, well, one of the reasons is because I have a lot of flowers. You don't need to use pesticides on a lot of pests. Instead, you can handpick them, like you can handpick cutworms and slugs, or use a tweezers if you don't want to pick up the slug. Aphids can be washed off with a strong spray of water, and once they're off the plant, they're not going to get back on it. There are lots of ways to treat pests that don't involve spraying something poisonous on your garden. Also, if you have a plant that just keeps getting a certain pest and it's bothersome to you, I would get rid of the plant and not replant it and make your life easier. And you obviously don't have the right plant in the right place. All I use in my garden is I use an organic slug bait that is not harmful to pets. And sometimes, but very rarely, I use neem oil or insecticidal soap. Now, both of those things you can buy in a small container, and it's heavily concentrated. You put like a teaspoon of it in a spray bottle and use that as a spray. But know that whenever you use pesticides, you might also be killing off pollinators and beneficial insects. And when you heavily spray for a certain pest, you will kill the beneficials. You won't kill all the bad bugs, and the bad bugs will come back, and the beneficials won't be there to take care of the bad bugs, and you could end up with a worse problem. So be really careful about applying anything harmful to your garden. Another thing you can spend a lot of money on are garden tools. But you can save money on them by going to garage sales or estate sales, looking on sites for inexpensive or free tools like Nextdoor. You can go to the Habitat for Humanity restore and see if they have what you're looking for, shop sales at the end of the year. I would caution, though, that you always buy tools that are going to hold up to your garden. When I lived in Florida before this, and I had plastic hand shovels, and I tell you, you can't even get them an inch into the soil around here. So be sure to buy ones that are strong enough to hold up for what you're going to use them for. Now, I know I have covered a lot of stuff, and I hope it hasn't been like overwhelming. If you're just starting out, what I would recommend is starting small. You're going to learn from everything that you do. You're going to make mistakes, embrace them because you're going to learn a lot from them. I would recommend planning and doing research to figure out what you need to do, and then keeping track of what you've done so you remember, oh, this plant's too big and I should have planted it later. Now, when did I plant it? Oh, and what did I plant? So keep track of things.